The last normal moment of Daniel Mercer's life happened at exactly 11:47 on New Year's Eve. He knows the time because he checked his watch when they pulled into the driveway. Not because anything felt significant about the moment, but because he was the kind of man who noted things, who paid attention to details, who believed that precision was a form of respect for the world around him. The air outside was cold enough to sting, carrying that particular winter sharpness that makes everything feel cleaner and more defined than it actually is. Susan was walking ahead of him toward the front door, her heels clicking on the frost-dusted path, her phone already in her hand, the evening already over for her before it had finished for anyone else. Daniel was still carrying the warmth of the party in his chest, the laughter of colleagues, the clink of glasses, the particular goodwill that a new year brings before it has had the chance to disappoint anyone. He was happy. He remembers that specifically. He was happy. And then Susan stopped walking, and Daniel looked up, and the front door of their home was standing wide open. What followed in the next 60 seconds was ordinary enough. The realization that they had been robbed, the missing television, the overturned cushions, the violated privacy of drawers pulled open, and belongings handled by hands that had no right to touch them. All of that was ordinary in the way that bad things are ordinary, painful, but survivable, the kind of crisis that a methodical man like Daniel knew how to address. What was not ordinary, what Daniel would not understand until much later, was Susan's face. She stood in the middle of their ransacked living room, and she did not look frightened. She did not look violated. She looked at the overturned cushions and the empty space where the television had been, and she looked, and this is the word Daniel kept coming back to in the months that followed, relieved. He did not understand it that night. He filed it away in the part of his mind where he kept the things he was not yet ready to examine. He would examine it later. By then, the cameras would have already told him everything. Before we go any further into this story, I need you to stop right now and drop a comment telling me where you are watching from. Whether you're in New York or Texas or California or anywhere across this country or around the world, we want to know you are here. This community means everything, and every single comment gets read. And if you're new here and this story is already pulling you in, please hit that subscribe button right now, because what is coming in the next 40 minutes is the kind of story you're going to want to send to every person you know. I promise you that. Now, back to Daniel. Because the night of the robbery was just the beginning, and what the cameras were about to record was going to change four lives permanently and put one man in federal prison. Daniel and Susan Mercer had been married for 12 years. 12 years of Sunday breakfasts and shared mortgage payments, and the specific texture of a life built carefully by two people who had once been deeply in love and had somewhere along the way confused the structure of love with love itself. Daniel was a structural engineer. He designed buildings that could withstand pressure, that distributed weight intelligently, that held their shape under conditions that would collapse lesser constructions. He brought that same quality to everything he cared about. He was steady. He was present. He was the kind of husband who remembered the small things, who noticed when Susan was tired before she said so, who left her coffee on the counter already made the way she liked it on mornings when she had early meetings. He was not flashy. He was not exciting. He was something rarer and more durable than either of those things. He was faithful. Susan was a licensed financial planner with a client base she had spent a decade building. She was brilliant with numbers, gifted with people, and possessed of social intelligence that made everyone who met her feel immediately understood and valued. She had a talent for surfaces, for presenting exactly what a situation required, and concealing everything underneath that did not serve her. It was, as Daniel would come to understand, with the particular clarity that only arrives after everything is already over, not just a professional skill. It was the central architecture of who she was. Their marriage had not ended in a single dramatic moment. It had thinned gradually, the way light thins in late afternoon, still present, still functioning, but no longer warming anything. Daniel had felt the thinning. He had attributed it to the natural settling of a long marriage, to the busyness of two demanding careers, to the ordinary friction of two people sharing one life. He had not looked underneath the surface. He trusted surfaces. That was the thing Susan had always counted on. The morning after the robbery, Daniel drove to an electronics store and stood in front of a wall of security systems for 20 minutes before choosing the most comprehensive option they carried. 8 cameras, off-site cloud storage with backup redundancy, real-time motion alerts to his phone, coverage for every entry point and common area of their home. He brought the box home and began installing everything methodically, the way he approached every problem, starting with the most exposed point and working inward. It took him most of the day. While he worked, he could hear Susan in the kitchen on her phone, her voice low and careful in the way it got when she did not want to be overheard, saying things he could almost but not quite make out. Once he heard her laugh, quiet and intimate, the kind of laugh that belongs to a private conversation, the kind she had not directed at him in longer than he wanted to calculate. When he finished the installation, he went to the kitchen and told her exactly what he had set up. He showed her the app on his phone. He showed her where each camera was positioned. He told her both of them had been added to the system and would receive motion alerts directly. Susan looked up from her phone. She said okay. She looked back down. Daniel stood in the kitchen doorway, holding the empty equipment box, and tried not to think about the fact that Susan had been asking him to install a security system for over a year. She had brought it up repeatedly. She had sent him links to specific systems she liked. She had mentioned it after every neighborhood incident, after every news story about local break-ins, after every conversation with a friend who had recently upgraded their home security. And now that he had finally done it, now that the cameras were up and connected and recording, she could not have been less interested. He tried not to think about what that meant. He put the box in the recycling. He made dinner. He told himself there was an explanation. There was. He just did not know it yet. Now I want to ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question before you answer in the comments. Think about the longest relationship of your life. Think about the person you trusted most completely. And ask yourself honestly, were there moments when something felt wrong that you explained away? Were there signals you received that you chose not to examine because examining them would have required you to dismantle something you were not ready to lose? Because Daniel Mercer is not a foolish man. He is not naive or oblivious or weak. He is a man who loved his wife and trusted her and chose, the way most of us choose, to believe the version of reality that allowed him to keep believing in his marriage. Most of us would have done exactly the same thing. Drop your answer in the comments right now. And if you're not yet subscribed, please fix that immediately, because this story is about to deliver its first twist, and it is not the one you were expecting. For days after the cameras went up, Susan came home from work and sat across from Daniel at the kitchen table and told him she was going on a spa weekend with her friends. Barbara, Nancy, and Karen, she said. They had been planning it for weeks. A resort in Sedona, massages and early nights, and the kind of restorative quiet that women need after a hard season. She described it with a fluency that told Daniel she had rehearsed it, though he could not have said exactly how he knew that. The details were too smooth, too complete. Real plans have rough edges. They have the uncertainty of things that were genuinely negotiated between real people with real schedules. Susan's Sedona weekend had no rough edges at all. It arrived fully formed and required nothing from him except agreement. He gave her agreement. He kissed her goodbye at the door on Friday morning and watched her drive away with her overnight bag and her rehearsed story and her phone. Then he went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and called his friend Brian Caldwell. Brian had spent 15 years in private investigation before transitioning to corporate security consulting. He was the most methodical person Daniel knew outside of himself. Daniel said, "Brian, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Brian said, "Always." Daniel said, "If a person wanted to verify whether someone was actually where they said they were going to be without alerting that person in any way, how would they do it?" There was a pause on the line. Then Brian said, "Send me access to your camera system. I will watch the feeds this weekend. You go somewhere else, so you are not sitting in the house watching it yourself." Daniel sent him the credentials. Then he drove 4 hours to his brother Matthew's house and tried to sleep. He could not sleep. He lay in Matthew's guest room and stared at the ceiling and waited for a notification that he already knew was coming. It came at 9:47 on Friday evening. Brian called before Daniel had finished reading the alert. His voice had the specific quality of someone choosing their words with great care, because they understand that what they are about to say cannot be taken back. He said, "Daniel, she is not in Sedona." Daniel closed his eyes. He said, "I know." Brian said, "She is not alone." Daniel said nothing for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me everything." Brian told him everything. The man's name was Donald Chambers. He was the senior partner at the largest financial advisory firm in the state. He was 53 years old, publicly married with 3 children, a church board member, a youth sports sponsor, a man whose photograph appeared regularly in the business section of the local newspaper beside words like respected and community-minded and trusted. He walked into Daniel's home with the ease of a man who had done it many times before. He knew where the coat hooks were. He knew which light switches controlled which rooms. He moved through another man's house with the comfort of ownership, and Daniel, watching the footage on his phone from his brother's guest room 4 hours away, felt something he had never felt before in his life. Not rage, something colder and more focused than rage. He felt clarity, complete, absolute, unobstructed clarity. He called Kevin Hargrove, his attorney, at 10:15 that same evening. He said, "Kevin, I need you to start building something that cannot be dismantled." Kevin said, "Tell me everything you have." Daniel told him. Kevin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Daniel, I need to tell you something before we go further. This may be bigger than a divorce case. Much bigger." Daniel said, "Explain." Kevin said, "The name Donald Chambers has come across my desk before. There are whispers in the financial community about irregularities at his firm. Client fund discrepancies. If your wife has been in a relationship with this man for any significant period of time, and she is a licensed financial planner with access to client data, we may be looking at something that involves the Securities and Exchange Commission." Daniel sat in the dark of his brother's guest room and felt the ground shift beneath him in a way that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with the sudden understanding that the life he thought he was living had been replaced, quietly and completely, by something he did not yet have the full shape of. He said, "Kevin, what do I do?" Kevin said, "Nothing yet. You do absolutely nothing yet. Let me make some calls. Here is the first twist, and I need you to brace yourself because this one arrives without warning." While Kevin was making his calls and Daniel was lying awake in Matthew's guest room, trying to hold himself together, Brian was doing what methodical investigators do. He was looking deeper. He accessed, through entirely legal channels available to licensed security consultants, the business registry connected to Susan's professional credentials. What he found there stopped him completely. 18 months earlier, Susan Mercer had incorporated a consulting company. Its name was Meridian Advisory Solutions. It had one listed officer, Susan. It had one client on record, Chambers Financial Advisory. In the 18 months since its incorporation, Meridian Advisory Solutions had received $61,000 in consulting fee payments from Chambers Financial Advisory. $61,000. Paid to a company that had no website, no office address, no employees, and no documented work product of any kind. Brian called Daniel at 2 in the morning and read him those numbers. Daniel sat up in the dark and said, "How long?" Brian said, 18 months of payments. "But Daniel, I need you to listen carefully to what I am about to tell you. The payment structure, the amounts, the timing of the transfers, it matches a pattern I have seen before in fund misappropriation cases. I think the consulting payments were not payments for consulting. I think they were Susan's share of redirected client funds." Daniel said, "Whose client funds?" Brian said, "Based on the transfer dates, I cross-referenced with Chambers' firm's public filing discrepancies. I believe we were talking about elderly retirement account holders. People who trusted Chambers with their savings. People who had no idea their money was being moved." Daniel felt something happen in his chest that had nothing to do with his own betrayal. He thought about elderly people, about savings accounts built over lifetimes, about trust extended to a man who had been in Daniel's home on Daniel's couch, wearing Daniel's betrayal like a costume. And the clarity he had felt earlier sharpened into something that felt very much like purpose. I need to stop here because I think this is the moment where this story stops being about a marriage and starts being about something much larger. Daniel Mercer was not just a betrayed husband. He was, without knowing it, the only person positioned to expose a financial crime that had been stealing from vulnerable people for nearly 2 years. The cameras he installed to protect his home were about to protect 11 strangers who had no idea they needed protecting. Think about that. Think about the fact that the robbery on New Year's Eve, the break-in that violated Daniel and Susan's home and sent Daniel to that electronics store the next morning, was the event that put the cameras in place that captured everything. Without the robbery, there are no cameras. Without the cameras, there is no footage. Without the footage, there is no evidence. Without the evidence, 11 elderly investors never get their money back, and Donald Chambers never faces consequences. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the beginning of justice for someone else. Drop that thought in the comments. Tell me if that lands for you the way it landed for me. And tell me where you are watching from, because I want to know who is in this community right now hearing this story. Kevin Hargrove spent 8 days building the case. He worked with a forensic accountant named Amanda Briggs, who had spent 12 years working financial fraud investigations and who, when presented with the Meridian Advisory Solutions payment records alongside the transfer discrepancy data Brian had compiled, said with the quiet certainty of someone who has seen this exact pattern before, "This is a straightforward fund redirection scheme with an inside facilitator." The inside facilitator was Susan, not the architect. That was Chambers. But Susan had provided client vulnerability data, had authorized certain transfer documents using her credentials, and had received payment through the shell company in exchange for her participation. Whether she had fully understood from the beginning what she was participating in, or whether she had been drawn in gradually and found herself too deep to exit, that question would be for investigators to determine. What Kevin determined, after 8 days of careful construction, was that Daniel's evidence package, the camera footage, the shell company records, the payment histories, the transfer authorization documents recovered through legally obtained financial discovery, was comprehensive enough to submit directly to the Securities and Exchange Commission. He called Daniel on a Thursday morning and said, "We are ready." Daniel said, "Do it." Kevin submitted the package that afternoon. Then he called Daniel back and said, "There's one more thing we need to do before Susan comes home on Sunday. We need you to be in that house. We need you at that table, because there's going to be a conversation and it needs to happen face to face and it needs to be witnessed." Daniel said, "I will be there." He drove home on Saturday. He set the dining room table, not with dinner, with documents. Susan came through the front door on Sunday evening, glowing with the specific warmth of a person who has spent a weekend exactly where they wanted to be. She dropped her bag by the stairs. She called out his name in the easy tone of someone who expects nothing unusual. She walked into the living room and stopped. Daniel was sitting at the dining room table. The table was covered in documents, printed and organized and labeled and arranged with the precision of a man who had spent a week preparing for this exact moment. Susan looked at the table. She looked at Daniel. Something moved across her face too quickly to fully read. Then the surface returned, smooth and practiced. She said, "What is all of this?" Daniel said, "Sit down, please." Something in his voice, the absolute stillness of it, the complete absence of emotion, made her sit without arguing. He remained standing. He picked up the first document and placed it in front of her without a word. It was the motion alert timestamp from Friday evening at 9:47. She looked at it. He picked up the second document and placed it in front of her. It was a still image from the living room camera. Donald Chambers, in their home, with Susan, in the specific posture of two people who are entirely comfortable with each other in a space they have shared many times before. Susan's jaw tightened. The smooth surface developed its first visible crack. Daniel picked up the third document. He said, "This is the incorporation record for Meridian Advisory Solutions, a company registered in your name 18 months ago." He placed it in front of her. He picked up the fourth. He said, "This is a record of $61,000 in payments from Chambers Financial Advisory to Meridian Advisory Solutions over the same 18-month period." He placed it in front of her. He picked up the fifth. He said, "This is a summary prepared by forensic accountant Amanda Briggs, identifying 11 retirement account holders at Chambers Financial Advisory whose funds were redirected during the period in which your credentials were used to authorize internal transfers." He placed it in front of her. He picked up the sixth and final document. He said, "This is a confirmation letter from Kevin Hargrove confirming that the complete evidence package was submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission Financial Crimes Division last Thursday." He placed it in front of her. Then he sat down. He looked at his wife across the table full of evidence, and he said, "Now you can speak." What happened next is the moment I want every person watching this video to understand completely. Because this is not the moment where Susan denied everything or attacked Daniel or reached for her phone to call her own attorney. This is the moment where 12 years of performance finally ran out of surface to hide behind. Susan looked at the documents spread in front of her, and something in her face simply gave way. Not dramatically, not with tears and gasping the way that guilt performs itself in movies. Quietly, the way a structure gives way when the load it has been bearing finally exceeds what it was ever built to hold. She said, "I did not mean for it to become what it became." Daniel said nothing. She said, "In the beginning he told me it was a fund rebalancing strategy, that clients would ultimately benefit." Daniel looked at her steadily. He said, "Susan, you're a licensed financial planner. You have been for 14 years. You know what unauthorized fund redirection looks like. You knew from the first transfer." She did not answer. The silence stretched between them. Then she said, "Yes, I knew." Those two words landed in the room and did not leave. Daniel nodded once, slowly, the nod of a man receiving confirmation of something he already knew but needed to hear spoken aloud. He said, "Those 11 people trusted someone with their savings. Some of them are in their 70s and 80s. Some of them built those accounts over 40 years of working." He paused. He said, "Did you think about them at any point?" Susan looked at the table. She did not answer. That non-answer was the loudest thing in the room. Daniel stood. He picked up his keys. He said, "Kevin has referred a criminal defense attorney. You're going to need one." He said it the way you say something that is not a threat or a judgment, but simply a fact. The way you tell someone it is raining and they will need an umbrella. Then he walked to the door. Susan said, "Where are you going?" He said, "To Matthews." He said it without turning around. The door closed behind him with the specific finality of sound that both people in a room understand means something is completely and permanently over. But the story was not over, because Donald Chambers was still free, and Daniel was not finished. I want you to pay close attention to what happens next, because this is the moment the story delivers what it has been building toward from the very first frame. Kevin had submitted the SEC package. The investigation had opened. But an SEC investigation moves at the pace of institutional process, and Daniel understood that Chambers, a man with resources and attorneys and the practiced self-preservation instincts of someone who had been managing risk professionally for decades, might sense the walls closing and take steps to protect himself before the investigation reached him. So Daniel made one more call. Not to Kevin, not to Brian. He called Amanda Briggs, the forensic accountant, and he asked her a single question. He said, if Donald Chambers knew that the SEC had received this package, what would he do first? Amanda said, he would try to move assets. He would start shifting money to accounts that are harder to reach. He would probably try to contact his inside person to coordinate a story. Daniel said, and if we wanted to prevent that? Amanda said, you would need to get him in a room before he knows the package has been submitted. You would need him to believe he is walking into something routine. Daniel said, can you help me do that? Amanda said, I can do better than that. I know someone at the SEC field office who can make a phone call on your behalf. The kind of call that sounds like a routine compliance inquiry, but is actually the first step in a coordinated arrest sequence. Daniel said, make the call. 3 days later, Donald Chambers received a phone call from a woman identifying herself as a compliance officer requesting a brief in-person meeting regarding a routine audit of transfer documentation at his firm. The meeting was scheduled for 10 in the morning at a neutral office location. Chambers arrived in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, accompanied by his personal assistant, and carrying the particular confidence of a man who has never been seriously questioned in his professional life. He walked into the meeting room. He stopped. Sitting at the table were 3 people he had not expected: Amanda Briggs, Kevin Hargrove, and Daniel Mercer. The door behind him was closed by a 4th person he had not noticed entering behind him. a federal agent from the SEC Enforcement Division who placed a document on the table in front of Chambers and said, "Mr. Chambers, please have a seat." Chambers looked at Daniel across the table. Daniel looked back. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Chambers said, "What is this?" Daniel said, "This is what accountability looks like." He said it quietly. He said it without anger or satisfaction or any of the emotions that the moment might have been expected to produce. He said it the way you state a fact. Chambers' attorney arrived 20 minutes later. It did not change anything. The evidence package was comprehensive. The forensic trail was complete. The SEC enforcement agent had everything he needed. Chambers was formally notified of the investigation and the asset freeze order that had been filed that morning, preventing him from moving any funds connected to the firm pending the investigation's completion. He sat in that room, and for the first time in his professional life, he had no surface left to manage and no performance left to give. He looked at Daniel one more time as he was being escorted out. Daniel held his gaze without flinching, without hatred, without triumph, with the complete and steady clarity of a man who had done what needed to be done and had nothing left to prove to anyone in that room. I need to stop here, and I need to ask you something, because this moment in the story is one that I think deserves a pause. When Daniel looked at Donald Chambers across that table, he did not have the anger you might expect. He did not have the satisfaction of revenge, as most of us imagine it. What he had was something quieter and more permanent than either of those things. He had the knowledge that 11 elderly people were going to get their money back. He had the knowledge that a man who had been stealing from vulnerable people while presenting a face of community integrity and family values was going to be publicly and permanently accountable for that. And he had the knowledge that he himself had not broken, had not collapsed, had not allowed the worst betrayal of his life to turn him into someone he would not recognize. Is that enough? Is quiet integrity enough of a reward for that kind of pain? Tell me what you think in the comments right now, because I think different people watching this are going to have very different answers, and I want to hear all of them. The consequences arrived with the methodical completeness of things that have been properly built. Donald Chambers was indicted on 9 counts of securities fraud and 4 counts of wire fraud. His trial lasted 3 weeks. He was convicted on all 13 counts. He was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison. His firm was dissolved. His assets were frozen and liquidated to fund full restitution to all 11 victims. His photograph appeared in the business section of the newspaper one final time, not beside the word trusted, but beside the word convicted. Susan cooperated fully with the SEC investigation in exchange for reduced charges. Her financial planning license was permanently revoked. She was fined a full amount of the $61,000 she had received through Meridian Advisory Solutions. She received 3 years of supervised probation. She moved out of the state within a month of the sentencing, and Daniel has not seen or heard from her since, except once. A letter arrived 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Handwritten, no return address. It said, "I know I have no right to ask anything from you. I know what I chose and I know what it cost. I am writing only because I want you to know that I understood from the moment I saw those documents on the table that you were a better person than I deserved. I hope the life you build next is everything you should have had." Daniel read it standing at his kitchen counter. He read it twice. Then he walked to the sink and burned it with a match and ran the tap and watched the ash disappear. Some things deserve a response. Some things deserve only to be finished. There is one final thing I need to tell you. The detail that reframes this entire story and that I have been holding until this moment deliberately, because I wanted you to have the full weight of everything that came before it when you hear it. On the night of the robbery, standing in their ransacked living room, Susan said something to Daniel that he remembered clearly but did not fully process until months later. She looked at the overturned cushions and the missing electronics and the violated space of their shared home, and she said, "This is exactly why I've been telling you we need a security system. We are completely exposed without cameras." Think about that. She said those words on the night that began everything. She had been asking for those cameras for over a year. She had sent him links, made suggestions, pushed gently, and then less gently for him to install exactly what he eventually installed. And when he finally installed them, she lost all interest immediately because she had forgotten something that would cost her everything. She had asked for them so long ago and so persistently that she had stopped expecting him to actually do it. She had stopped accounting for the possibility that the cameras she asked for were actually there. The cameras were her idea. The evidence that ended her marriage, exposed her crime, put her professional license in front of a revocation board and sent Donald Chambers to federal prison for 14 years. Started with a suggestion she made herself. She built the instrument of her own accountability. She handed Daniel the blueprint. She just forgot that he was the kind of man who eventually builds everything he promises to build. She forgot who she had married. Daniel told me that detail over coffee on a quiet Tuesday morning several months after everything had settled. He said it without bitterness, without satisfaction. He just said it the way you say something that you have turned over in your mind enough times that it has become simply a fact rather than a wound. He said she asked for the cameras because somewhere underneath everything she wanted to feel safe. I think she always wanted to feel safe. She just looked for it in all the wrong places. He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug and looked out the window at the ordinary Tuesday morning happening outside. He said, I hope she finds it eventually. I genuinely do. And I believed him, because Daniel Mercer was not a man built for hatred. He was built for something more durable and more difficult than that. He was built for the truth. He always had been. He had just needed the cameras to prove it. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to its last word. If something in it moved you, if the dining room table scene made you hold your breath, if the moment in that meeting room with Chambers made you feel something shift in your chest, if the final detail about the cameras being Susan's idea made you put your hand over your mouth, please drop a comment right now. Tell me which moment got you the most. Tell me whether you think Susan deserved exactly what happened to her, or whether you feel any complicated human sympathy for a woman who made catastrophic choices and lost everything. Tell me what you would have done in Daniel's position when Chambers walked into that room. Tell me where you're watching from, because this community is one of the most thoughtful and genuine places on this platform, and I read every single comment personally. If you're not yet subscribed, please do it right now, because we have more stories coming that are going to hit you just as hard and stay with you just as long. And if this story made you think of someone who needs to hear it, someone who is carrying a betrayal right now, someone who needs to know that truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deeply it has been buried, share this video with them today. It might be exactly what they need. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and never forget that the truth does not need your help to survive. It just needs enough time and one honest camera